Time seemed to stop as he held her necklace in his hand. He kept looking at it, trying to confirm his suspicion. It was small, crooked, imperfect in its symmetry, a silver heart that leaned slightly to the left. He'd made it that way. On purpose. 20 years ago. Robert Miller stood frozen behind the glass counter of his jewelry shop, his fingers trembling around the pendant that had once belonged to his little girl. He remembered the day he crafted it, the way his daughter's laughter filled the air as he etched her initials on the back, LM. Lily Miller. Now, 2 decades later, that same pendant lay in his palm, but it didn't belong to his Lily. At least, that's what the world would say. Across from him stood a young woman, early 20s, elegant, her voice soft but confident. She wore designer clothes, carried herself with quiet grace. Her name was Maya Bennett, daughter of Arthur and Catherine Bennett, one of the richest families in the city. She had brought the necklace in for repair, complaining that the chain had broken. But Robert wasn't hearing her words. All he could hear was the pounding of his heart. He asked hesitantly, "Where did you get this?" Maya smiled, unaware of the storm she had just unleashed. "Oh, this? My mom gave it to me when I was 4. It's kind of sentimental." 4. That number hit him like a wave. His daughter was 4 when she disappeared. Robert managed a polite nod, pretending to study the chain under a magnifying lamp. But inside him, something cracked open, a flood of grief, hope, and fear. That night, when the shop closed, Robert drove home in silence. The crooked silver heart sat beside him on the passenger seat, glinting faintly under the dashboard light. He could barely breathe. At home, his wife Clara was sitting at the dining table, flipping through an old photo album. She had grown quieter over the years. Grief does that to people. Robert placed the pendant on the table. Clara looked up. Then she froze. Her hands started to shake. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Robert swallowed hard. "She came to the shop today. A young woman. Said her name is Maya Bennett." Clara stared at the necklace as if it were alive. The crooked heart, their heart. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Clara finally said what both of them feared to ask. "Do you think it's her?" Robert didn't answer. He couldn't, because to say yes would mean reopening a wound that had never truly healed. And to say no would mean accepting that their daughter was gone forever. That night, sleep never came. Robert lay awake, haunted by memories of that terrible day 20 years ago. The park, the laughter, the moment Clara looked away, and the scream that followed. The endless searches. The missing posters. The police reports that led nowhere. The empty crib. And the silence that replaced a child's voice. By morning, Robert had made a decision. He couldn't ignore the truth anymore, or the possibility of it. He had to see Maya again, even if it broke him. The next day, Maya Bennett returned to collect her repaired necklace. Robert waited behind the counter, his heart pounding. He handed her the jewelry, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then, before he could stop himself, he blurted out, "I think I made this. For my daughter." Maya tilted her head, amused. "Really?" "Yes," he said softly. "She was 4. The same age your mother said you were when you got it." Her smile faded slightly. She didn't understand, not yet. Robert hesitated, then took a breath that felt like falling off a cliff. "She went missing. 20 years ago." Maya blinked, unsure if she had heard right. "What are you trying to say?" "I think," he whispered, voice cracking, "you might be my daughter." The world seemed to stop again. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Maya laughed, a nervous, disbelieving laugh. "I'm sorry, sir, but that's impossible." Her voice trembled now, though. Robert quickly caught himself, realizing how insane he must have sounded. He nodded, apologizing, trying to soften the tension. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. It's just the necklace. It's exactly the same. I made only one like it." Maya tried to smile politely, but something in her eyes shifted, a faint shadow of confusion. She left the shop, clutching the necklace tighter than before. Robert stood there, watching her go. And in that moment, he knew. No matter how crazy it sounded, he wasn't wrong. That night, Maya couldn't sleep either. She sat on her bed, staring at the silver heart, replaying the old jeweler's trembling voice in her mind. Why had he looked at her that way? Why had he seemed heartbroken? She remembered asking her parents about her early childhood once. They'd said there had been a fire, that all the pictures of her before age 4 were destroyed. It never felt like the full truth. Now doubt began to grow, and with it fear. Maya Bennett sat in her dimly lit bedroom, the necklace resting on her palm. She traced the crooked heart with her thumb, the tiny flaw that made it unique. Something about it felt too personal to be coincidence. Her mind kept circling back to that old man's eyes, the way they filled with pain when he spoke. He wasn't crazy. He was broken, and that made her afraid. The next morning, over breakfast, she tried to sound casual. "Mom," she said, stirring her tea, "do you remember that necklace you gave me when I was 4? Catherine Bennett looked up from her tablet, smiling faintly. "Of course. It was one of your favorites." "Why?" Maya hesitated. "Do you remember where you got it?" Catherine blinked, then frowned slightly, searching her memory. "Oh, I think it was from a small jeweler downtown." "Why do you ask?" Maya forced a smile. "Just curious. It's beautiful." But her voice betrayed her. Arthur Bennett looked up from his newspaper, lowering his glasses. "You sound troubled, sweetheart. Is something wrong?" "No," she lied. "Nothing. But something was wrong." When her parents left for a charity event that evening, Maya slipped into her mother's private study. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She began searching through drawers, trying to find anything: receipts, photographs, letters. Most of what she found was ordinary: business papers, invitations, medical files. But then, tucked at the back of a drawer, she found a box labeled family albums. Her pulse quickened. She opened it, and inside were dozens of neatly arranged photo books. She flipped through the first one, her parents' honeymoon. The next, her mother's pregnancy photos. Then her own baby pictures. A picture of her first birthday. Her second. Her third. But then the photos stopped. Between age 3 and 4, nothing. Just blank pages. Her mother's handwriting on the empty pages said, "Lost in the fire." Maya frowned, her breath quickening. Because the earlier albums, the ones with her parents' photos, were untouched. No signs of smoke or water damage. Perfectly preserved. She stared at the empty pages, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Something didn't add up. She whispered to herself, "If there was a fire, why are their pictures still here?" A cold realization began to take shape, a truth too dark to name. That night, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She confronted her mother in the living room. Her voice trembled. "Mom, what fire? What really happened to my pictures?" Catherine looked startled, then uneasy. "Oh, honey, we told you. There was an accident in the storage room years ago." Maya interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "Stop lying to me." Arthur appeared from the hallway, voice stern. "Maya," but she kept going. "There was no fire, was there? You said all my photos before 4 were gone, but yours are perfectly fine. Why?" Her parents exchanged a look that confirmed her worst fear. Catherine stood frozen, lips trembling. Arthur spoke quietly, controlled, cold. "Sometimes the truth does more harm than good." That was all he said. Then he walked away. Maya stood there, shaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched the necklace to her chest. In that moment, she knew the truth was real, and it was buried deep. The next morning, before dawn, Maya drove to the old jewelry shop. The rain hadn't stopped. She stepped out of her car and looked through the glass. The shop was closed. But she could see Robert inside, cleaning his tools, lost in thought. She knocked softly. When he saw her, his face changed, surprise, then hope. He opened the door. She stood there, soaked, trembling. I believe you," she whispered. Robert didn't speak at first. He just stared at her, eyes filling with tears he'd been holding for 20 years. Clara appeared from the kitchen doorway, startled to see the young woman standing there. And then, for the first time in decades, she smiled. Maya stepped inside. The small house smelled like old wood and lavender. There were framed photos on the wall: Robert, Clara, and a little girl with dimples. "Lily." Maya looked at the photos, at the necklace, then back at Robert. "I don't remember any of it," she whispered. "But something feels right here." Robert took a step closer. His voice broke. "You don't have to remember. We never stopped waiting." For the first time, Maya felt a strange peace, like the missing part of her life had finally whispered back. They didn't need proof that night. They just needed the warmth of being together again, even if the world said it was impossible. But the world doesn't stay silent for long. And the truth, once awakened, doesn't rest. The next day, Robert Miller decided to do the unthinkable. He would confront the Bennetts and take back his daughter. Robert Miller had faced silence for 20 years. But that morning, as he polished the crooked heart one last time, he decided silence had done enough damage. He wasn't going to hide behind grief anymore. He was going to stand for truth, whatever it cost. Maya had begged him to wait, to think, but he couldn't. A father who's lost a child doesn't think, he aches. So he drove, through the polished streets and marble gates that led to the Bennett estate. Rain glistened on the gold-lined fences. Everything about that mansion screamed power, untouchable and cold. He stepped out of his car, clutching a small velvet box, the repaired necklace inside. The guard hesitated when he said his name, but Robert's eyes made the man step aside. There are certain looks only grief can teach. He walked across the marble hall, his boots echoing against the silence, until Arthur Bennett appeared at the top of the staircase. Impeccably dressed. Controlled. Dangerous. Robert's voice shook. "I want to speak with your wife." Arthur frowned. "And you are?" "Robert Miller, the man who made this necklace." He opened the box. The crooked heart shimmered under the chandelier's light. Catherine Bennett appeared behind her husband, curious, graceful as always. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Robert said the words that broke the air in two. "You stole my daughter." Arthur laughed softly, a sound colder than ice. "I think you should leave before you embarrass yourself further." "I'm not mistaken," Robert said, his voice firm now. "That necklace was made for Lily Miller. My daughter. She vanished 20 years ago." Catherine's hand trembled. She quickly hid it behind her back. Robert caught it, the flicker of guilt, the flinch of memory. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered. Arthur stepped closer, his tone sharp. "I don't know what fantasy you've built, but you will not bring your delusions into my home." Robert took a breath that shook his soul. "She deserves the truth. Maya deserves to know who she is." Arthur's eyes hardened. "Get out." Two guards appeared, escorting Robert out before he could speak again. As the heavy doors closed behind him, he turned once more and shouted through the rain. "You can bury the truth in gold, Arthur, but it doesn't rot." That night, Robert and Clara sat in silence, hands entwined. He told her everything. The rejection. The humiliation. She wept, not from shock, but from the cruel familiarity of hope breaking again. Yet Maya didn't stop. She called, she visited, she begged her parents for honesty. And when that failed, she made a choice that would change everything. She stood beside the Millers, ready to fight. Together, they filed a petition. A court-ordered DNA test. The story spread like wildfire. Jeweler claims Billionaire's daughter is his long-lost child. For weeks, the city buzzed with gossip. Paparazzi cameras flashed. Reporters camped outside both homes. Through it all, Maya tried to stay strong. But at night, she'd cry in secret, torn between two families, two worlds. When the court finally convened, the city seemed to hold its breath. Cameras crowded the courthouse steps, flashes blinding every arrival. On one side, the Millers, humble, quiet, nervous. On the other, the Bennetts, poised, wealthy, and perfectly rehearsed. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. The judge, stern and gray-haired, peered down over his glasses as the case began. Robert sat beside his lawyer, his hands trembling slightly. Across from him, Arthur Bennett exuded calm authority, his wife's hand resting delicately on his arm. Maya sat between them, her biological father on one side, the man she'd called Dad all her life on the other. The distance between them was more than physical. It was the measure of 20 years. The courtroom clerk announced, "Case number 2846, Miller versus Bennett. Petition for a DNA test to establish biological parentage." Murmurs filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Robert's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, the evidence is not merely circumstantial. The necklace in question bears an imperfection identical to one crafted by my client 2 decades ago for his daughter, Lily Miller, who disappeared in 2005. The Bennett's adopted daughter, Maya, possesses that exact pendant. We ask only for the right to truth, a DNA test to confirm or refute Mr. Miller's claim." Arthur's lawyer rose slowly, a smile faintly playing on his lips. "Your Honor, this case is built on sentiment, not science. My clients have raised their daughter with love and integrity. They possess authenticated birth certificates, hospital documentation, and an existing DNA test that confirms Maya Bennett's biological relation to them. This story, while tragic, is fiction. A desperate man's delusion." He turned briefly toward Robert. "Sometimes grief blinds us to reality." Robert clenched his fists, staring at the lawyer's expensive suit, at the way words could twist truth into ridicule. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Miller, do you have any evidence beyond the necklace and your personal recollection?" Robert hesitated, his throat dry. I have the memory of a father who never stopped looking. The judge's expression softened slightly, but procedure was procedure. He turned back to the Bennett's lawyer. You mentioned a prior DNA test? Yes, Your Honor. Conducted by a certified private genetics lab 15 years ago, when a similar claim arose. The results excluded any connection to the Millers. The lawyer handed over the neatly bound documents. The seal gleamed. The judge nodded slowly. Maya's lawyer, the one she'd hired herself, rose timidly. Your Honor, if I may, my client has reason to believe there may have been irregularities in the prior testing. Arthur's gaze snapped toward her like a blade. Irregularities? She continued carefully. No direct accusation, sir. But given the significance of this case, we request an independent retest under court supervision. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. The judge looked between them. Mr. Bennett, would your family object to another test? Arthur's voice was smooth, rehearsed. Absolutely. My daughter's dignity is not a game for public amusement. We've done this once before. We will not do it again. Robert stood abruptly, unable to stay seated any longer. Please, just one test. That's all I'm asking for. If I'm wrong, I'll disappear forever. But if I'm right, his voice broke. If I'm right, she deserves to know her real name. The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop. Maya stared at him, tears glistening in her eyes. She didn't move. The judge sighed. Order. He reviewed the documents for several long minutes that felt like hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was slow, deliberate. The evidence presented by the defense, including medical records, birth certificates, and the prior DNA report, is both comprehensive and certified by state authority. Given the absence of contradictory material evidence, this court has no grounds to order a redundant DNA test. Robert's lawyer tried to object, but the gavel struck. Case dismissed. Defendant exonerated. Mr. Miller, I strongly advise you to refrain from further pursuit of this matter. Maya's heart sank. Robert stared down at his trembling hands, the echo of the gavel burning in his ears. Catherine reached over and squeezed her husband's hand, relief washing over her face. Arthur straightened his tie and whispered something to his lawyer, something about nuisance handled. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed outside. Flashes filled the air. Robert said nothing. Clara held his arm, whispering, "Let's go home." Maya lingered at the back, watching both families leave in opposite directions. She felt like the earth had split in two, and she was standing on the crack. Outside, Arthur Bennett paused near his car. He looked back, meeting Robert's eyes for a brief, silent moment, victory in one, defiance in the other. Then he got in and drove away. Robert stood in the rain, holding the crooked heart against his chest like a fragment of a lost world. He whispered to no one, "Truth isn't decided by courtrooms." The storm answered with silence. The court verdict ended, but peace never came. Robert Miller returned to his quiet house on the edge of town. The same one where laughter once echoed before time stole it away. Now there was only the ticking clock, the whisper of rain on windows, and the ghost of a daughter he never really got to hold again. Though the world had seen the trial, though the truth had clawed its way into headlines and whispers, there was no victory. The law had spoken, papers were signed, and people moved on. But Robert couldn't. He still visited the workshop every morning, polishing empty lockets and silent memories. The crooked heart necklace sat by the window, its gold dimmed by dust. He'd lift it sometimes, feel its weight, and wonder what it meant now, a symbol of truth, or of everything truth had cost. Clara tried to help him heal, but grief like his didn't need noise. It needed time. And time, it seemed, had stopped trying to heal him. Maya had gone back to her world, the Bennett world. At least, that's what the cameras showed. Her smile was there, bright and practiced. But Robert knew. Months passed. Seasons turned. The story faded from the public eye, leaving behind scars and unanswered prayers. Then, one cold evening, as Robert was closing his shop, the phone rang. It was late, too late for customers. He hesitated before answering. "Hello. Mr. Miller," a woman said quietly. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I used to work at St. Mary's Hospital, the same one where the DNA tests were done." Robert's heart skipped. "Yes." There was a tremor in her breath. "I shouldn't be calling, but I can't live with it anymore. Arthur Bennett paid me a six-figure sum to switch the DNA samples. Your test results, they were falsified." Silence. For a long moment, Robert couldn't breathe. Sarah continued, her words trembling with guilt. "I'm willing to testify. I've kept records, emails, even a deposit slip. I can prove everything." When the call ended, Clara was already crying. Not from pain this time, but from the unbearable mix of relief and rage. Within days, the Millers' lawyer filed a second motion to reopen the case. The city lit up again with cameras and chaos, but this time, the truth had allies. Sarah Jenkins walked into court with her head held high, flanked by guards and fear. She spoke under oath, her voice shaking as she recounted every lie, every transaction, every night she lost sleep knowing what she'd done. The courtroom fell silent. Even the Bennetts couldn't hide behind their wealth anymore. Facing undeniable evidence of fraud, the judge ordered one final step: a new, neutral DNA test to be conducted by the National Forensics Laboratory. No private influence. No middlemen. Only truth. But before the results arrived, something unexpected happened. One evening, as rain whispered against the windows, there was a knock on the Millers' door. Robert opened it, and there he was. Arthur Bennett. Alone. He looked smaller somehow. Older. His arrogance stripped away, replaced by a quiet, heavy kind of defeat. "Please," Arthur said, his voice raw. "May I come in?" The air felt thick with years of pain, but Robert nodded. Arthur sat, clasping his hands together like a man about to confess to God himself. "I can't carry this anymore," he said. "My wife. Catherine, she couldn't have children. The doctors said it was impossible. She broke down after every failed attempt." He swallowed hard. "Then one day she came home with a child. Said she found her wandering alone by a playground near the river. I thought she was joking, until I saw the bracelet. It had your daughter's name." Clara gasped, tears already running down her face. Arthur's voice cracked. "She told me she was giving the child a better life. That no one would miss her. I wanted to go to the police, but I didn't. I was weak." He stared at the floor. "When you came years ago, I panicked. I bribed people, falsified tests, forged reports, anything to protect my family. To protect Catherine." He reached into his coat and placed a thick envelope on the table. "Here's everything: documents, receipts, statements. And a check. Enough money for 10 lifetimes. Just don't destroy what's left of us. Please." Robert's jaw clenched. His voice was steady but burning. "You kidnapped my daughter. You bought lies with blood. You think money fixes that?" Arthur's eyes filled with shame. "I know it doesn't." Robert stood, trembling with years of bottled pain. "I don't want your money. I want justice." But before he could say more, a voice spoke softly from behind. "Dad." It was Maya, Lily, her voice breaking the storm. She stepped closer, tears shining in her eyes. "Please. I know what they did was wrong. Unforgivable. But they also raised me. They loved me, in their own broken way." She looked at both men, one who raised her, one who lost her. "If this goes to court, their lives will be destroyed. Their names gone. I can't lose both families." Robert's eyes softened. His anger met her sorrow, and something in him broke. He turned to Clara, who nodded slowly, her hand finding his. "We'll drop the charges," he said quietly. "But she stays. She comes home." Arthur nodded, tears slipping down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're better people than I ever was." Weeks later, when the official results came back, they confirmed what Love already knew. Maya Bennett was Lily Miller. The Bennetts left the country, their empire quietly dissolving behind closed doors. No more cameras. No more lies. The Millers didn't throw a celebration. They didn't need to. One quiet evening, they sat together in the small living room, the crooked heart necklace glimmering between them. Lily leaned her head on her father's shoulder. For the first time, Robert smiled without pain. After 20 long years, the silence was finally over. And in that silence was peace. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that once used to hurt, but now felt full. The evening light slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, brushing across Robert's workbench. The same bench where he had made the crooked heart 20 years ago. Lily sat beside him, her head resting against his shoulder, the faint sound of her breathing steady and calm. Clara hummed softly from the kitchen, an old tune, one she used to sing when Lily was small. Robert turned the necklace in his hand one last time. The silver caught the light, and for a moment, it almost looked new again. Not perfect, never perfect, but whole. He smiled faintly. "I made this for you," he said, his voice low. Lily looked at him, eyes glistening. "I know." The clock ticked once. The world outside moved on. Cars passing, rain starting again, the rhythm of ordinary life. But inside that small room, time seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in 20 years, Robert didn't feel the weight of searching. He didn't feel the ache of what was missing. He just felt her, warm, real here. He placed the necklace gently around her neck, and as the clasp clicked shut, he whispered, not to her, but to the memory of every year they'd lost. "Welcome home, my little girl." And somewhere, in that quiet, crooked silver heart, the world finally felt right again.